They just found nearly $1 billion in Somali cash at the airport. $750 million was the initial report, and some are reporting hundreds of millions of dollars. The level of fraud that the Somali community has inflicted upon this country should essentially mean that they are all banned forever. This is absolutely wild. And to be honest, even though it's just being reported now, I try to do a little bit of digging around every story I find. And this has been a known Somali scam since at least 2018. Why we did nothing about it? I don't know. Let's go back to the initial report of it. And now finally there's a federal probe into it today.
For 5 months, we've been investigating what appears to be rampant fraud in a massive state program. A fraud suspected of costing Minnesota taxpayers as much as $100 million a year. Our reporting is based on public records and nearly a dozen government sources who have direct knowledge of what's happening. These sources have a deep fear, and there's evidence to support their concerns that some of that public money is ending up in the hands of terrorists. We begin at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport.
This started in Minneapolis in 2018 was when they started funneling the money. Suitcases filled with the money. This Fox 9 learned that the cloak and dagger scenarios now happen almost every week at Minneapolis Airport. The money is usually headed to the Middle East, Dubai, and points beyond. Sources said in the last year alone, more than $100 million in cash left the airport in carry-on luggage. The national go-to expert, we were interested in what was going on. They were tracked because you can leave with that kind of cash as long as you declare it. Not that I ever have, but legally you can carry the cash. You know, in 2015, investigators documented $14 million in carry-on cash. By 2016, it had mushroomed to 84 million. Then last year, 700 million. And now this was back in 2018. Now it's as much as $750 million. Former TSA agent says that she saw Somali men fly out of Minnesota with suitcases filled with cash, $1 billion over 5 years. They also once had a suitcase filled with brand new passports. They were always waved through, probably because they had TSA on the payroll.
Suitcases filled with millions of dollars of cash. And the couriers were always Somali men traveling in pairs. And they got through the checkpoint. It just really absolutely blew my mind the first time you open a suitcase and you see millions of dollars of cash. And typically what would happen is a Leo or a law enforcement officer would come, check their credentials. I don't know what kind of questions they asked them, but their IDs were always documented, and probably their plane tickets as well. So there is a trail of that out there. And I would believe with all the cameras at the airport that if they started there, they could probably find each and every individual that brought money through the checkpoint.
Obviously, this seems suspicious, if not alarming, given what seems to be a pattern here. So you're talking about millions of dollars flying out of Minneapolis, and you think it happened about every week or so? Is that right?
So it certainly seemed like it happened every week. The suitcases came in, and it was always, the MO was always two Somalian men traveling in pairs.
Nobody thought, where are they getting all this cash? Nobody. Here's a message from TSA back in December. A guy comes through TSA Phoenix with over $350K in cash. He had a Minnesota driver's license, had paperwork for customs in Dubai, and allegedly had paperwork saying he's a courier. While my supervisor left the private screening room, he told me openly that families in Minneapolis are sending loads of cash back home to Sudan and Somalia, and it gets distributed in Dubai somehow. I talked to my supervisor after he cleared him for travel and said he comes in once a week or every 10 days with no less than $250,000 in cash. And I think they've seen about $1.6 million. This is everywhere, and it is absolutely crazy. Here's another $1 million. There are smaller couriers who come to the airport almost daily with $1 million in cash in their luggage. They're moving $350 million a year. And how would this be transferred around the world? Well, it goes into, of course, Dubai. Back in 2022, almost 90% of people charged with felony fraud in Minnesota were Somali, just saying.
It was literally a foreign ATM taking cash out of the United States to foreign destinations, and we don't know the reason why. But that is now under investigation by the FBI and HSI. And people say, well, is this normal? I mean, maybe this goes on at every airport. We got comparative statistics yesterday. The amount of money that these Somali couriers took out of the Minneapolis airport with the TSA flagging it daily was 99 times larger than all the cash that was declared in luggage going out of New York's JFK International Airport, one of the busiest international airports in America.
99 times higher.
99 times more than what flies out of Dallas. 90% more. 90% more than what was flown out of Seattle, which is the most common airport for people to go to Asia from. This was an abnormally high amount of cash being stuffed in the luggage, being detected every day by the TSA. Because, by the way, the couriers they declared
they're
the money.
legal.
They
Yeah.
say, yeah, we got $1 million in our suitcase, which you have to do to get it through the airport. And nobody in the Biden administration thought it was unusual that $1 million of cash was moving in luggage out of the country, out of Minneapolis every day. Way more than any other airport in America at the time.
This is crazy. So the detections, $342 million in 2024 and $349 million in 2025 have triggered the IRS and Treasury audits of banks and money services. Bro, $700 million. Can we get a federal audit at $1 million? Like, if you are taking $1 million in USD cash currency out of the airport and you have a totally legal reason for it, that's fine. But I can't imagine that happens more than once a year. This is actually crazy. They've been linked to Minnesota's massive welfare fraud, like the $250 million Feeding Our Future scandal involving fake meal sites, ghost childcare centers. Federal prosecutors charged 78 defendants, mostly of Somali community, with wire fraud, money laundering, and bribery. We're never going to get that money back, though. That's all in the Terry's hands already, right? This says authorities have found hundreds of millions of dollars in suitcases in Minnesota airport, potentially tied to Somali fraud, per Real America's Voice. Here is the investigation.
So we're going to turn our attention back to the Somali fraud investigation, as we've discussed before. Authorities...
Is she wearing fishing lures and earrings?
Have discovered suitcases containing hundreds of millions of dollars in a Minnesota airport. Now, in the meantime, Republicans are working to cut funding for Somali-led organizations with alleged ties to the massive fraud scandal. Now, as the FBI pushes forward with its own investigation, one key question arises. What does accountability even
look at all this money? These are probably 100K bands. I don't know. I've never seen that amount of cash
look like in this case moving forward. So joining us now to talk about all of this and more is New York Congresswoman Claudia Tenney. Congresswoman, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Great to be on with you too. What a crazy time we're seeing here, aren't we?
Absolutely insanity. And I know oversight in the House is looking into these fraud allegations, but I wonder if it's even bigger than we have uncovered thus.
Well, I mean, it would stand to reckon that, you know, $700 million in 2 years coming out of Minneapolis in cash. You think Minneapolis is the only airport that they were using? Probably not. Ohio is a big Somali community. There's Somali communities in Wisconsin. Like, how much of this? I mean, what an embarrassment for the United States government. Just a complete and utter embarrassment.
As far the $700 million in cash going out of the airports there, I have a feeling we are still just scratching the surface.
Yeah, it looks really bad and obviously very alarming to see that this U.S. cash has been legally going through our airports. And of course, there is a requirement of reporting if you're going to carry more than $10,000. There's a reporting requirement, but I think a really interesting part about this is if, isn't it going to be a little suspicious when you start seeing 10,000, 100,000, millions, and now, more, as John reported earlier, more money that goes through JFK, goes through the Minneapolis airport. Something's wrong there. And I think something that's very interesting that we impose on banks is that banks are required under banking law to require and file and keep track of what they call suspicious activity reports. This is something I think we need to do now when we see the large amounts of U.S. cash, and it's always U.S. cash. I mean, you're not going to see, Chinese yen or anything else going through there. And U.S. cash is king, and we need to certainly have this type of cash exchange reported. It's interesting because you see all this illegal immigration we've had over this time. And by the way, most of those Somalis that are in Minnesota probably came through a refugee program, and probably many of them are already legal American citizens. So suspicious activity reports, some kind of accounting for cash, I think would really be helpful. I'm looking at ways that we might be able to do this so that we could actually look at what's going on. Banks are required to do that. Individuals are not. But I'll tell you, if I'm a TSA agent or anyone else and I see this kind of cash going through, and that you're able to report the amount of cash going through.
I mean, it is absolutely crazy. It is absolutely crazy that we're talking about this level of money, and it's finally like, well, I guess maybe we'll just maybe we'll look at it now that it's $1 billion. I mean, this is insane. I mean, our government is asleep at the wheel. Meanwhile, most Americans are paying 30% to 40% taxes just so it can get sent to Somalia and Saudi Arabia. These people who are overseeing these programs, they should be arrested. These government officials in these states that allow this to be to have let this go on forever should be impeached and removed. Like, what are we even doing here? I hope you're informed by this video. If you were, please leave a like on it. If you haven't yet, please subscribe or follow down below, and we'll talk to you again real soon.